So, actually I'm going to start with our panel first a little bit. I'm going to kind of the first question is going to be actually for Reverend Adam. And let me just explain. Ryan is a licensed therapist, psychiatrist that has her own office here in the Phoenix area. So she is here to help us with healing and grief and how do we go forward in life and kind of give that perspective. And also Adam, obviously, with the theology and the different types of ways. His very first question is going to be, the movie really does portray God in many different ways. And so, Adam, the very question is, how did that affect the understanding for Mac, actually, when he was going through different episodes that he was going through?
I think what really stuck out to me was when Papa, as Mama, an African American woman, tells him, "You're not ready for me. You're not ready to see me as a father figure." So that's kind of like the beginning of why I think the Trinity was portrayed as different. You have an African American woman, a Middle Eastern man as Jesus, which is a little bit more accurate to what we're used to, and an Asian woman as the Holy Spirit, as Ryan. I think even outside of the movie in itself, I know that was very controversial when I was looking into the shack. There's a lot of controversy as to why is this movie depicting the Holy Trinity as three different races and a woman, right? Like that can be very challenging for many of us who grew up with God as a father figure. And David said in the movie, great white beard. And I think meeting Matt where he was with not only just what happened in this story with his daughter, but also giving insight as to the why behind, the parental trauma with his dad. That's where God meets us. God meets us with all the challenges that we've encountered in our lives, all the traumas that we have, and God was with the flow with us. So I think us seeing God as different genders, different races, challenges us to meet God where God is meeting us as well. Whether that's the great white man with the white beard, or I see God in everything. So there's not a specific way to experience God. That's how I interpret it.
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest things is humility. And sometimes we're just trying to make that connection. And when we're going through difficult times, it's really difficult. How does our brains work? With something as tragic as what happened to the daughter. When somebody's going through that, you have a whole family dynamics. And I know the movie met from Matt, who was able to do all the different ways to try to move forward and find joy again. But such trauma, if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I made some notes, and one of the things that I noted in just the first 15 minutes of the movie is this series of traumatic events that was documented, with Mac's experiences and the family's experiences. And it made me think about the adverse childhood experiences. And I don't know if anyone's heard of those, but this was a study that was done in the 90s by Kaiser Permanente. And it was this massive study of how adverse childhood experiences that happen before the age of 18 can be predictors of outcomes for adulthood. Health outcomes, mental health outcomes, longevity. And there's flaws in the study. The study was primarily done with upper middle class white folks. So right there, it's flawed. And it gave us this foundational understanding of how those early childhood experiences can affect people. And even just looking at Mac's early childhood experiences, that there's extreme violence, specifically in the, if you do the ACE questionnaire, one of the questions is if you witnessed violence against your mother. That is one of the questions. So not only is he experiencing violence, he's witnessing the violence against his mother, not to mention the choices that he made. And then there's religious trauma wrapped in there, which is not an ACE score, or an ACE questionnaire score, but maybe ought to be. And so going in, just by my count, he's at like an ACE score of 5. And from any adverse childhood experiences that score of like 2 or more, then the outcome predictors, it's just this exponential growth of potential for chronic disease and short lifetime. And it doesn't mean that someone will go that route. It just means that statistically they may. And one of the things that, as we have learned more about trauma and the effects of trauma on the body and on the brain, we have now shifted focus to resilience. And so to kind of get to the core of your question about that resilience piece, one of the things that we know for kids is that having a single solid adult in their life who they can trust and who will show up for them, that having that person, it doesn't have to be a parent, but having that person is one of the ways that it predicts resilience in kids. And so I think about this family, that they experience this tremendous trauma, not just losing Missy, like with the son nearly drowning, having to do CPR on your child, like these are serious, significant events all happening at once. And it's the way that the movie portrays Nan as, yes, she's struggling, and she's being this solid, predictable person for the kids. And we can get up into all kinds of role discussions about why she's the one who has to do that and not him. But as far as that family goes, the predictor of outcomes really does lie with the parents, and if they can get it together, and that's an oversimplification, but if they can figure out how to continue and live, then the kids have a much better outcome prediction.
I think one of the things that, why it's so important, so if you're able to forgive or go through, we call them steps, but we go through these huge emotions in grief. And this is for you, Reverend. It's tough because we can say, okay, if we can get to this point, we can forgive, we can heal, we can see joy again. But there's such evil and there's such good. How does one connect, or how does one find that balance in their life?
A takeaway that I got from the movie was when Papa came out as an Asian man at the end, and he's,
Or just a little bit louder?
the takeaway that came out of the movie for me towards the end was, it's a daily thing. You have to forgive every single day. So, at least for myself, it's a conscious decision. Being aware of all of the and all the darkness that is out there, even within ourselves, and choosing grace daily. Being self-aware, being aware of what is present in the world. And we're human. We're allowed those emotions. We're allowed to be pissed off. We're allowed to be sad. We're allowed to have joy and be happy. But being conscious daily of making that decision to forgive, to give grace, to not be judgmental, not only to others, but to ourselves, to our families, to our friends. I think that's the way to level awareness and the light is moving forward as Jesus did, as the Holy Trinity is telling us to be compassionate, understanding, giving grace. That's how I approach leveling the dark and the light. Is taking it as it is, processing it, and moving forward. Otherwise, we're going to get stuck in that cycle and not be able to, rise above and move forward.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask Ryan. This stuck. Haven't been there. It in a way, it paralyzes everything that you're doing in life. And that's kind of where Matt was. You could just see through his actions and that anger. So how does one, getting help, there's the spiritual, but also therapy and different ways of talking it out. How does one come back to themselves and feel their emotions start to move towards more of a joyous versus being stuck?
So one of the quotes that I jotted down from the movie was one of the ones about forgiveness. And it was, let me find it real quick. Oh no, did it not save? Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about letting go of another person's throat. And I thought that was a very practical and real statement, that you can look at it through any lens. You can look at it through a faith-based lens, you can look at it through a brain-based lens, you can look at it through any lens. And that idea of, I watched the movie last night at home with a friend, and then Danny came in at the end, and so we were kind of talking through parts of it. And that idea of, in thinking about how the pain literally sits in the body, and it eats away. And bringing that forward, bringing it out, separating it, that no matter what avenue a person takes to do that, it's not so much the how they do it, it's that it's done. If it is done through faith and prayer, or if it's done through talk therapy, or if it's done through movement or meditation, however it is done, to take that the pain, because all it's doing is eating away at the person who's carrying it. It doesn't affect the bad guy. The bad guy's still the bad guy and has his own demons. And my pain, my hatred, does nothing to him. All it does is eat me and my family. And so those steps of thinking about that quote, you don't have to be friends with this person, you don't have to do anything other than just release their throat, because in reality you're actually holding on to yourself, you're not holding on to them.
I think one of those things is hello? Or you can hear me. I think one of the things is that, first of all, the shack is also a book, and you can get it on Amazon, obviously, and you can go to it if you go to the bookstores as well. And it also has this different the way of the shack, but it pretty much runs very close to the movie. It's one of those books that's very close to what is actually happening in the movie. The other thing I want to talk about is the dark night itself. That's the most natural thing. It's very natural that we go through these situations. We can't always be in this joyful time. Things happen to us. In the dark night of the soul, what happens though, and when you want to look at these, you can see at the end, there's this gratitude that happens to us as we come out of the dark night of the soul. I found something that either one of you want to speak on that.
I think about, there's a metaphor that I use quite a bit. And what I ask people to do is visualize that you have 7 colors, 7 crayons or colored pencils that represent the colors of the rainbow. And draw a rainbow. So in your mind, draw the rainbow. And then take away one of the colors and draw the rainbow again. And consider, how do you feel looking at the rainbow with all 7 colors versus the rainbow with only 6 or only 5? And most people have a response of, well, it's still pretty, and it's incomplete. There's some incongruency in having them. And when I encounter someone who's really struggling with the full array of the human experience, that's the metaphor that I've started going to help connect to, we have to have the red and the yellow and the green. We have to have all of these colors, just like we have to have all of these emotions, because without some of them, we're not fully experiencing all of them.
How do I follow that? and to what Ryan said, even if all the colors aren't there, it's still complete. I think that really stuck out to me right now. But yeah, it's letting yourself, I use a lot of the metaphor of riding the waves. I love the water, I love to swim, until you're in a wave that you've never been in before. And you're like, whoa, I thought I knew how to swim. And I just feel like I'm in a washing machine. But had I not experienced that, if you don't experience those tidal waves that you've never been in before, and you come through, you survive, then it changes your perspective, it challenges you. It makes you look at yourself like, wow, I went through some stuff, and I made it through, I swam through, I kept swimming. I got back on my surfboard and started hanging 10. That's kind of my theme, So you gotta go with the flow, and even when you're deep in the trenches, and there seems like there's no way out, there's no hope, you're not alone. Whether it's spirit, God, family, friends, community, it's always trying to come back to square one, to your own shack, to your own internal shack. And healing those parts that have been traumatized, that have been damaged, that have led you through the dark night of the soul. And working through it to move forward and grow from it, not remain in those spaces. So that's how I see the dark night of the soul.
I love how he used that analogy, the surfing, to this California boy. I love that. Okay. Let's open it up for some chat. Who's got some questions? Who wants to go first?
I know Daniel had questions.
I know Daniel has questions. Here we go.
Hello, my name is Daniel. I am, so let me just say, when I left here last night, I was pissed. I couldn't understand why everybody was laughing at different parts of the movie. Sorry. But then today, in coming back, it struck me just right now that, how am I trying to say this? That it's not really a question I have, it's just, oh my God. Okay. I was pissed because I wasn't understanding how we were taking something so horrific happening, and a lot of what happened in the story is my life as the beginning of my life, and how things just weren't fair and right or whatever. But I didn't turn out like the dad, you know, whose dad was beating him, and I didn't realize that until I was talking to somebody else, and they let me realize that. Anyway, my point is that I felt like a hypocrite because I was going to come here today and let you know that I was very good about what we see, but I'm not. It's kind of open my eyes and see that I'm okay.
Yes, Lord.
I'm really okay. It is difficult. It first brings a lot of different emotions out. But you can see the anger that can happen, but the movie secretly kind of throws some things in there that we can relate, because the laughter, joy piece actually is a huge communication piece, because it's coming from a whole different place in a tragic way. Can you speak to that a little bit, Ryan? Because, go ahead.
Can I ask my question?
There I am, cutting you off.
No. I feel like through everything that I've been through in my life, I'll be 50 soon, I'm not a bad person. I didn't choose the path that was dealt to me. But I also feel like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I feel like it was me that did it, you know. I asked God for, to give me some reprieve, to like make this person back off, to, you know, to please let me have some peace. And I don't feel that that was ever answered. So my question is where's God in the process of this? And, you know.
It's an excellent question. Go ahead, Reverend Anna.
God is in the midst with you. God is within you. And as we saw in the movie, when Popeye's mama was saying, you know, essentially, I'm not going to give you a way out, you know, they're here with you. I can relate to you, and your emotions are completely justified. Don't fight them, don't suppress them. It's kind of back to my sermon when I was talking about, you know, God, why have you forsaken me? We feel that so many times in our lives. If even Jesus said it on the cross, right? And it talks about it in the movie, you know, my son gave his life, and it hurt me too. I remember her saying that. To level that, you know, that kind of, well, where is God? Where is my support? You're supposed to be here physically, telling me what to do, give me the signs, right? I can only speak for myself. My intuition is how God speaks to me. So whatever I'm feeling in the moment, I have to sit in it. Even though it can be traumatic. I mean, trust me, there's been instances in my extended family where there's been trauma, and we've all been just super angry, super pissed off, and it is never ending. Grief is never ending. But it goes back to making a daily decision to forgive, move forward. And I think also God speaks through us through awareness. Not only awareness of the external factors, but the internal and yourself. And being aware of that, okay, God, I didn't ask for this. I'm not asking for these emotions that are coming about because of the way I was raised, because of the traumas that I've encountered, because of the life I chose to live, or didn't choose to live, right? Many of us, we didn't choose to be fabulous. We just are. And you know, society doesn't always agree with that, right? They say it's a choice. But in that comes grace for ourselves. I think I'm in my grace era, giving myself grace, giving a lot of other people grace, a lot of things grace. You know, I can just say like driving, right? Someone cuts you off and immediately you're pissed off and you're like, oh, what can I do to like get them back? Or like, but it's kind of like Jinx Monsoon says, the water off the duck's back. In moments where it does feel, to answer your question, in moments where it does feel like God is not with you, I think that is when God is most with you. And it's up to us not just to rely on an external source or, you know, God like show up and tell me what to do. It's empowering ourselves to find resources, find community, find therapists, find friends, lean on community, lean on our partners, but mostly lean on ourselves as well, and appreciate the God within yourself. Become aware of your Christ heart. You're already there because you're thinking, God, where are you? Right? But because you're aware of what's going on, I think God is in that moment with you working through it. I mean, Spirit doesn't leave us, it's within us. But in those traumatic moments, the moment you say, God, where are you? God is the most there. Even though it's not physical, even though it's not tangible, you have to be aware that God is there. God is within you. And you gotta trust that, like when he's on the boat, right? He's like, oh man, well how are you walking on the water? Even when he tried to walk on the water afterwards without Jesus. He's like, well, it's better if we do this together. I'm getting chills right now. I don't know if it's because I'm cold and I'm never cold, or it's spirit, but that stuck out to me, you know? Jesus says, it's better if we do this together. You being here, you being aware of your spiritual journey, is God moving through you, even through the hard waves or the coasting waves. I hope that answers your question. I know it's that one, but Ryan?
Go ahead, Ryan.
So I actually, one of the quotes that I jotted down, I think relates exactly to your question. And this is Papa speaking. She says, just because I work incredible good out of unspeakable tragedies doesn't mean I orchestrate the tragedies. Don't ever assume that my using something means I caused it or that I need it to accomplish my purposes. That will only lead you to false notions about me. Grace doesn't depend on suffering to exist, but where there is suffering, you will find grace in many facets and colors. And that was, through the movie, that was one of the quotes that really stood out to me. And from a therapist perspective, a behavioral health perspective, I want to highlight like two things, something Adam said and something that you said, Daniel, is this idea of I've been through horrible, awful things, and I am here, and I'm showing up today. And part of my training is being very intentional with language, and the word "and" gives space for two things that seem to oppose to exist. And so this idea of every time you realize you're using the word "but," you're negating everything you just said. And so if you replace that with an "and," what you're doing is you're allowing this. I've had awful things that happened to me that I had no control over. And I have chosen each day to show up differently. So that's kind of the behavioral health side.
One of the things, I'm going to share a personal story. My first boyfriend and I had just come out, and we've been attending this church, and he was in a coma for 5 weeks. And Reverend Patrick had come by a couple of times. But it was like the 5th week, and we knew that it was just a matter of time. He did this beautiful prayer over David. And at the very end of the prayer, he said, "And God, will you help Andy to trust you?" Oh my gosh. That was a huge moment in my life. First of all, after you left and I thanked him, and I was like, trust. I thought I always trusted God. I thought I was well connected. Through the next 72 hours, I started to realize how many defenses I had thrown out. Because, first of all, to come out as a gay man, I lost a lot. Now I was losing my very first boyfriend. And prior to that, I had a good friend that was 6 weeks earlier had passed away, and I found him in the bathtub. I realized how much traumatic and how all of a sudden I started pulling away, thinking I had a connection with God, and I just realized all of these abandonment things stopped me in my tracks to trust God. And so I share that story because trust is one of the key things, is that you have to open up and trust God to help you by realizing you're never alone. Any other questions?
And I'm Tony. I don't know if this is a question more than just kind of an observation. I'm not sure, but what really, really hit me in a really, really profound way last night was when Mac went into I think it was like a cave, and met wisdom and had to sit in the chair and judge. And it was like seeing myself for like the first time. I didn't realize that I had been that person, have been that person for so much of my life. For me, it's not, I don't know if it's been so much judgment or like blaming others, so I don't have to take the blame. I don't have to take responsibility for whatever. It really, really hit me, and it just opened my eyes to, wow. Like I said, it was like seeing myself for the first time, and it just really, really, really resonated with me, and I was just really, really just taken aback by it, and I was really surprised by his reaction in the movie and the way he reacted to it, and his coming after that happened, and his finally, him saying, he was able to, the wisdom told him, she's like, one of your children can go to heaven, one has to go to hell. And then he said, no, I'll go to hell, you leave them alone. Like I said, it was really, really profound for me. So that's basically what I have to say about it. So that's it.
Adam and Reverend Adam and Ryan kind of explain, because there is this very natural piece in the wisdom part, and facing sometimes our greatest fears. So kind of going to take it to a fear part. Those fears are so difficult. So what happens to us in that moment that gives us the wisdom. What was she trying to show Mac, we'll say, in that portion of the wisdom?
So, fear, from a behavioral health perspective, fear is coming from a real or perceived threat of life or death. You know, that if we boil it all the way down. And what can happen is if we have experiences that teach us that the world is unsafe and that it's a real or perceived threat of safety, then we respond in ways as if the threat was real. And it doesn't matter if the threat is real or if it's a perceived threat, the way that the brain and the nervous system interpret it is that it's real. And so even thinking about in the movie, the images of all of these things that have happened, and then while she's challenging him and asking these questions about judgment, there's, you know, I think what wisdom is speaking to is challenging, is this real? Is this perceived? And then also that part of, do you have any control over it? And that's something that I talk about a lot with people is, yeah, that's awful. And what can you do with that? Do you have any control over how your partner chooses to behave? Do you have any control over how your mom communicates with you? And the reality is all you have control over is your response. I don't know if that answers, but that's what comes to mind.
I think many times, and I talk many times about this, is that sometimes we think the person next to us, well, they have their own individual connection with God or spirit or the way that they want to respond. And so many times in that wisdom part, see our judgment starts to seep through, and we want to fix it. We want to help. We take on the responsibility as well. And one of the things that is coming to an understanding that you have to allow their spirit, their connection. That is the hardest thing in the world because we want to go in and rescue. It's in our nature. So go ahead and add a little bit to that.
At least for me, fear and judgment, many of us grew up with conditions, right, or agreements, as some of us may know them as. I remember distinctly in high school, believe it or not, I bullied my first boyfriend, essentially. And I think back a lot on that moment. I think that was a pivotal time for me. That was, I think, really early to become aware of my judgment and my fears. I was projecting. So at a very young age, I was 15 years old, 14 years old. And, poor little cute kid, we were in a band together, and I just didn't like how he was. He was able to be himself, flamboyant, and he wasn't out or anything, but you could just tell. And then later on, we ended up dating, and I was like, wow, I apologized, and I took ownership. I was like, I was bullying you because I had my own fears, because I was a pastor's kid with queer tendencies, and you're the only one. We're in a small city. I graduated with like 60 kids. We're a small town. So you're the only exposure to what that looks like. And I was like, oh, well, I don't like that, because those were the conditions that I grew up with. Not because of something I consciously, chose to do. It was just something that was ingrained to me, especially being Mexican. We're in a machismo culture. So at that moment, that's when I started recognizing that, you know, a lot of fear and judgment comes from projection. I see that out a lot on social media, a lot of, you know, different mindsets. Even later on, I got to study the Middle Eastern culture and the Muslim culture because I wanted to be a CIA agent and defend our country. You know, 9/11 had happened and all this, and I gained perspective. I saw the God in them just as much as God is within me. So how can I, you know, have this mentality, this negative mentality against a group of people, whether they're queer, whether they're a different faith, whether they're whatever, known and unknown biases just as well. Who am I to judge? Just like in that scene, you know, and I think us coming to that self-awareness, whether we're 14 years old or seasoned folks, I think that's something we need to get to, or I guess not something we need to get to, but I think we work with Spirit to get to open our perspective, open our hearts, see the God in everyone, see everybody as Spirit, or see each other, you know, see yourself in someone else, and giving grace, compassion, and understanding, coming to the table. You don't have to change your perspective like entirely, but be willing to come to the table, be willing to learn, be willing to grow. I admire this community so much because we have such a range of generations, and it's empowering to see that we're all here to expand our perspective, expand our minds, and challenge our spiritual journeys, work through traumas, gain the tools to move forward in becoming more Christ-like, you know, and that's what Jesus was sent here to do, to be an example of human incarnate, to feel those emotions, to question God, where are you, and still be a child of God, still be a loving spirit, hold no resentment, hold no judgment. And again, it goes back to it being a daily thing, choosing daily, consciously, to look at things differently. I mean, I choose everyday driving to give grace, you know. I'm like, they're just another person. I don't know what's going on with their story, but I see God in them. And that to me is how we overcome fear and judgment, is perspective and seeing ourselves in other people.
So I'm going to go ahead and go around the room, and I'll come back real quick. And I want you to kind of give me the most memorable, most impactful, put in either a word or just a few words about the movie, how it impacted you. Okay. Can I come back to you at the end? Okay, thanks.
I have a question for the panel about forgiveness. And I was taught as a youngster that forgiveness and forgetting were connected. And if you were not able to forget the incident, then you were not forgiven. So I'd love to see the panel speak to that. How can I learn to forgive without the forgetting piece? Because the forgetting piece isn't going to happen.
Ryan.
It's interesting, you know, how themes in life will like show up and then they're present in a lot of realms for a while. That forgiveness has been something that I've been thinking a lot about lately. And we think about forgiveness as an act to do to somebody else. But really forgiveness is that internal process. It's that and you know, as Adam was talking, I was kind of like doing this translation into like what he's describing as nervous system regulation. Is that we all have a window of tolerance. We've got a bandwidth that we operate in, and that's when things are going well. And then when something happens, we get pushed outside of our window, either above as hyper arousal, that's getting mad at the person who cut you off, or hypo-arousal, that's shutting down after an argument. Those are oversimplifications, but you know, any of these strategies that are used that get you back into your window, it's regulating your nervous system. And so thinking about forgiving and forgetting, because those are different things. And when you're in a relationship, there are times that you choose to privilege the relationship over what has happened. And that maybe that's the forgetting. But it's more about what are you learning and how are you growing from this experience. You know, if there is something that is terrible and you choose to forgive, and it's something that you don't want to continue that relationship anymore, that's okay. That's something you can choose as a human. That's part of, you know, that we do have our own autonomy. And at the same time, you may choose to move through life not as if that thing never happened, but how are you going to learn and grow from it? What are you going to do with it now that it has happened? And I don't know if that answers the question as much as, you know, it's not a binary. It's not an automatically pairing, and it's also not a complete unpairing. That it's this, how do you choose to maneuver, in part depending on the relationship. Because sometimes if it's your primary person and they've betrayed you, sometimes you're going to choose to stay with that person. Sometimes if it's a friend and they betray you, sometimes you choose not to stay with that person. And that all of that is okay. And you can forgive in every stage of that.
Okay, my name is James, and I do a little story before I get into the question. It's dealing with myself. I had a son, and he was diagnosed with brain cancer at a year and a half. Okay. And for the next year and a half after that, after he was diagnosed, he suffered every day, screaming and pain and crying and stuff for a year and a half. I was there. There's nobody to blame. So my question is, who do you forgive? How can you forgive? And if we're all God's creation, and He loves us more than the angels above, why would He let a 1-year-old kid suffer day to day for a year and a half? What point is there? And I left. I was a very big member of the church back then. I was politics with the church and everything. And I left the church 5 years because I couldn't get an answer about that. And I still don't have an answer to that. And that was 30-some years ago. And that's what my question is. How can you forgive somebody if there's nobody to forgive? And why does God let innocent people suffer?
So the good and, I really want to, the good and the evil, okay? If you could kind of speak to that, we'll start with Reverend Matt.
I think many of us can relate with that, Jason. Perhaps not that specific experience of having a child so young with an illness be affected, but the part of holding resentment against God and the church because this experience happened, especially to someone who had no control over anything, especially something as, like cancer, a physical thing. I think, believe it or not, I think even forgiving God in those situations, and to CJ's question as well, you don't forget. You're never going to forget that, James. We're never going to forget traumatic events in our experiences, just as much as we don't forget the joyous experiences in our life. And those emotions will keep coming up. I know I always see my mom lost her mom at 18, and it's been, I'm 33 now, it's been 30 plus years, and she still gets angry, still feels those emotions, and still forgives God and herself and her mom for leaving her, because that's forgiveness is a tool for us to move forward. Just as much as we celebrate God and are grateful to God for all, for being here, for all our blessings, counting our blessings, we also can forgive, God, as Ryan was saying about the quote when Papa was talking about, I don't impose these traumatic events onto the children of God, right? From young to seasoned. But we do get the tools to navigate through that and work through it. And if we have to forgive God for something, I feel like that is a valid tool to move forward and, navigate those traumatic experiences. That's how I see it.
I think also this is one of the most difficult pieces. And it comes into the cosmic Christ. So the cosmic Christ, remembering that it's just not you as an individual. It is so many, when you looked out into the fields, remember how all those lights were coming up? That's the cosmic Christ. Cosmic Christ is what happens and why does bad happen and why does evil happen and why does disease happen and what happens to us healthy-wise and all of a sudden we're not healthy. All of these things are within the cosmic Christ. Cosmic Christ not meaning God. Cosmic Christ is all of us making that. So within our thoughts, within our emotions, the way that we respond, not us as an individual. Remember, the cosmic Christ is everything. Everything out there is picking up all of this energy. It's picking up all of these thoughts. This is where a lot of the evil will come from, as well as the good. You do have the yin and the yang happening in the cosmic Christ. So we have free will. Just free will means something for you.
We have free will, which means that we have good and evil.
That's making up the cosmic Christ.
What everybody's saying is so emotional and overwhelming for me because watching this movie, when I first watched the movie, I experienced everything in this movie, every piece of this movie. I can relate to all the people who just spoke right here in my whole entire life. I'll be 50 Tuesday.
Happy birthday.
I'll be 50 Tuesday. So throughout this whole entire movie, when I originally watched it, it made me very, very emotional. James, I can relate to you because I've had 5 children, 3 of them died. Three of my girls passed away. So yeah, I got angry. I got real angry at God. I didn't understand why. I questioned him. And in my condition, I was always taught you don't question God. You just go with what he's telling you to do. I was conditioned like that. But eventually it works. Eventually you learn to talk through it with God and have your own personal let go. My question now is forgiveness, because I was always taught you forgive and you let go, because the forgiveness is for you, right? But then how about the other person? Because I'm still angry at the other person. I forgive them, but I'm mad. I gave them grace, and I gave myself grace, and I'm so angry. And I don't know where that anger is coming from. I'm so angry. Even though I forgave them, I'm angry because of the behavior that they did to me. And who was around me, right? So that's what I want to know. How do you, I can forgive. The problem is not me forgiving, it's letting go. Do we really truly let go? And how do I really truly let go after I forgive them? Because I'm so pissed off at them. I'm so angry of the action that they did. So I can forgive them because God's forgiven me for a lot of stuff. but it's the anger part, and honestly letting go to God. How do I do that? Like just hit God, because I still question. I just want to give it to Him. Like take it off my back so I'm not feeling angry, pissed off at you for what you did. It's not me not forgiving you for your behavior. It's not pissed off because you don't get what you did and how it affected my life today still. How it affected my kids' life today still. So that's what I want to get over. I want to get over the anger, and I want to be able to let go of the anger towards that person. Not forgiving them, because I forgave him a long time. I'm pissed off because he doesn't see how he affected my life and my kids' life at the time. So how do I do that? How do I let go of the anger? Sorry.
Teamwork. One of the most, I think a lot of people can get through a lot of the different things, but the last 30 minutes of this movie is the most difficult part, the forgiveness. So Reverend Adam, I want you to talk a little bit about it spiritually, and then Ryan, if you could talk to us a little bit about it emotionally, because it is the most difficult part. In the movie, he talks about you'll never really forget, and you have to say it 1,000 times. But some way, there's things that triggers, things that probably come around daily. How do we get through that spiritually? And I think it's in this part is the nucleus of trying to get some closure.
First of all, Camille, thank you for sharing. And I want to say that your emotions are valid and fair, and you can feel those emotions, feel anger, sit with it, but don't let it consume you. Because that's, I think, what this movie talks about is like the only one losing out with not forgiving and holding all these emotions, anger, resentment, sadness, all these emotions, we're only hurting ourselves, and that in turn affects us physically and our health, our blood pressure, all the medical terms. I'll leave that up to our medical professional over here. But processing those emotions, sitting with them, and yet you said you've forgiven, but if we're still in those emotions, we truly haven't gotten there. And that I'm just speaking for myself. Because I know I've said in my mind, okay, I forgive, and I don't forget, we don't forget, I've forgiven, but then I'm still mad, I'm still angry, I still want to, do to them what they've done to me, or, where's the justification? My mom watches a lot of Discovery ID shows, and she's like, why don't you watch them with me? I'm like, because I feel like there isn't always true justice. Someone's child was done away with, someone was, hurt physically, spiritually, mentally. There's no true justice. It may seem pessimistic, but it's the reality. Yeah, someone gets thrown in jail, okay, wow, but that doesn't, to me, that doesn't compare to what they done to the victim. But in that, I have to change my perspective, challenge myself to change my perspective, and move forward. If we stay in these emotions, we're not going to move forward. And as we saw in the movie, that becomes unfair to the people around us, our friends, our family. We take it out on them. They're like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, it's not you, it's another issue. So how is that fair, not only to them, but to yourself? Stay in those emotions. I say, ride those waves. Don't suppress them because they're only going to get worse. Ride the wave and move through it. Hang 10, when a surfer is surfing, I've never surfed, but I love that analogy. When a surfer is surfing, or when they're just learning, they get knocked off their surfboard so many times. Sometimes they're tied to their surfboard, sometimes they're not. But they get back on. they'll chill in the water. I guess I can talk about myself here. I tried paddleboarding for the first time with my sister, who's done it so many times. I fell off, and I'm a big guy, I could not get myself on there. And I drowned a little bit. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I thought I could swim, I thought I could hold myself in a body of water. But I couldn't get back on. I needed someone else's help. A stranger came out, a skinny little dude, you know? I'm like, bruh, you are not gonna bring me onto this paddleboard. And I trusted him. He got me onto the board. I fell off again, and he helped me again. But that was fine. I was fine in falling off again because that's the only way I can learn to get back on again. So, to your question, Camille and Reverend Andy, forgiveness is not about the other people, or letting go of anger is not about the other people. It's about yourself. What do I want for myself? How do I want to feel? How do I want to move forward? How do I want to be there not only for myself, but for the people around me? And it goes back to, it's a daily thing. And setting boundaries, you know? If that Ryan was saying earlier, if a friend wronged you and you choose not to move forward with that friendship, that's valid. You can have those boundaries, but you also have to respect the boundaries that you've placed. And in honoring that, you honor yourself, and you can move through that anger. And when it comes up again tomorrow, or you just get that thought like, oh, you know, like, while they're living their best life over there, and I'm over here, you know, making it through. Giving yourself grace, forgiving again, work through that emotion, and move forward. The only one that's going to lose out is yourself. If you accept it, you're aware of it, you process it, you move forward, I think that's how we can empower ourselves to continue being there for ourselves and others. I'd like to end.
I have about 1,000 things jumping through my head right now. A couple of, I guess, disclosures. In my practice, I actually don't work with grief when that's the presenting concern. If somebody calls and says, I'm dealing with grief, I want to see a therapist, I refer out. I, of course, over the course of working with people, grief happens, it comes up, and so it's something that's just part of my world, and when it's the presenting concern, I refer out, because it's just not my specialty, in part because when I hear the stories, it physically impacts me. And that's a good indicator to me as a professional that maybe I am not regulated on that enough to truly be able to help someone else. So I wanted to share like that grief piece. Anger is another one that sometimes people come in and there is just anger. And that's another one that, for me professionally, is very challenging to work with. And I'm going to say this, and my secular humanist is going to show in saying this, that sometimes there are things that happen that do not make sense. There is no meaning.
Okay.
There is no meaning. And I don't have an explanation for why children die. There is no meaning in that. What we have is that and we're still here. So what do we do now? Do we keep living? Do we keep going? And that's where, like, in talk therapy, that's one of the things, is this happened, and there's literally nothing we can do about it. It doesn't matter how mad or how angry or who we question or who we damn, there's nothing. And there may not be meaning. So when the anger is sitting there and eating, one of the questions I ask a lot is, how is it serving you? What is it doing for you? Sometimes anger is the way that your body is helping you remember what you've lost. And so sometimes it's about reframing that. Sometimes it's recognizing that it's keeping you in a place, because if you move beyond that place, you've left that person behind, or you've left that thing behind. So that's one of the questions that comes up for me is how does it serve? Because it does not create justice. But what is it doing for you? And kind of going back to that rainbow, every emotion is important. And feeling the anger is important. Now, is it keeping you stuck? Is it preventing you from taking your next step? Is it from preventing you from being present in relationships, from success at work, from success, whatever it is? So that's one of the questions that I always come up with. The other thing that bounced around, and Andy, tell me if I need to move on, is one of my, I don't know if I even, maybe a mantra that I really, really think about constantly is I really try to move through the world with unconditional positive regard. People are doing the best they can with the skills that they have, and that everybody makes sense given their experiences. So anybody who has done awful things, we can usually find how they make sense. Doesn't make it right, it doesn't make it okay. What it does is it highlights the humanity, and that today you can choose to do the best that you can. And maybe that means that you're really mad, and that you're angry, and that you want to fight with the world. And that maybe tomorrow it means that you can take one step. There's 1,000 other things. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think sometimes the difficult part that stands out in the movie is when he's looking at his daughter through the water, and you see this happiness. And so a lot of that is where we can take some peace, we can take some comfort there. Because when he wakes up in the hospital, one of the things that he does say, she's so happy there. So that is letting us into what might be behind the other veil. Thank you. Because it is a critical point, and when we hear the descriptions and stuff, that is what we hold on to. That's where we have to go to find the peace, the comfort. And it's the most difficult thing in the world to think in that way, because they're not here earthly, they're elsewhere within the cosmos as well. So one of the things here, I'm scooting over, first of all, happy birthday as well. Happy birthday! Boys should have a little joy. Now that you're